Welcome. In this course, we want to learn how a decision is made to fund a project. The reason this is important, of course, is that if we know investors' and lenders' motivations, we can create a financing proposal that will be accepted. And we can increase the chance that we can actually start to carry out our project. Because remember, a project plan without the necessary funding is no more than a wish. Unfortunately, money is scarce. The people who have money, such as banks and investment companies, have more calls on their money than they have money to invest. They cannot satisfy everyone who submits an investment proposal. They need to make choices about which proposals to back and which ones to reject. These investment proposals could be quite diverse in nature, ranging from the opening of a new store, building coastal defences, to cleaning up plastic waste from the world's oceans. In order to choose wisely, investors need a system that can compare the proposals like for like, and that can apply an objective criterion to weigh one against the other. There is exactly such a system, and it's called financial analysis. It's what investors and lenders apply, and it makes use of the fact that all investment proposals require cash flows to invest, and then they generate cash inflows when they start to operate. These cash flows give a uniform, objective and measurable criterion to apply to all investment proposals. A power plant will produce electricity revenues, a new store or a website will generate product sales, and an education will generate higher earning potential, etc. Then, when we have the cash flows, we need to value them in order to be able to compare them. You could simply add them all up and go for the proposal that creates the highest value per invested dollar. Let's look at two projects and compare their cash flows. Project A and B both require an identical investment, an investment of 1,000, and after 5 years they have both generated identical cumulative cash flows, 350 in total. However, there's an extra step we need to take now. In valuing cash flows, we need to take into consideration their timing. Later cash flows are worth less than earlier ones. If we had a choice between $100 today or $100 in a year's time, we wouldn't normally be indifferent. With $100 today, we could have $104 after 1 year if we would put that money in a bank account at 4% interest rate. We call this concept the time value of money, and we do this by discounting the cash flows at the prevailing interest rate, the so-called discount rate. The analysis we apply here is called discounted cash flow analysis, or DCF for short. The formula we apply is as follows. We take a cash flow and we divide that by 1 plus the interest rate, and then we do that to the power of the number of periods we have to wait. So I is the prevailing interest rate, N is the number of periods we have to wait. In this formula, the present value is lower if the divider is higher. The divider will be higher if the interest rate is high and if the period we have to wait is longer. Then we can add all these discounted cash flows up and get the net present value of our investment, or its NPV. A higher NPV suggests a more attractive investment. Now let's look at our two projects again, and let's factor in the time value of money. We're assuming that the discount rate is quite high for illustrative purposes. We divide each cash flow according to the formula and get the net present value of each cash flow, and then we add them up to get the NPV. Now we see that project A is clearly more attractive because its cash flows come in earlier. The NPV is the first criterion that investors and lenders will apply to determine if an investment is attractive. If an investment has a negative NPV, it will cost more than it generates. In an economic sense, making such an investment would only destroy value. Now let's go one step further. Now we want to determine what rate of return our investment is expected to generate, because a higher return is generally more attractive than a lower one. The second criterion that investors apply is the internal rate of return, or the IRR. We can use the same formula to calculate this, but now, instead of applying a given discount rate, we ask what rate will make the NPV 0. This is an iterative calculation in which we seek the right discount rate. We'll see later that Excel provides a useful formula for this. Let's look at our two projects again. Project A has an NPV of 0 if the cash flows are discounted at 12.08%. Therefore, Project A has an IRR of 12.08. Project B's IRR is 9.94%. That shows again that Project A is the more attractive of the two, and it quantifies by how much. Now there's one last step we can take. We need to determine the investor's hurdle rate. That is the lowest IRR rate that is acceptable for the investor. It is a hurdle we need to cross to get his investment. We need to understand that an investor needs to raise funding himself. The funding he provides to you also costs him money. He needs to make a return from your investment that is at least equal to his own funding cost, otherwise he'll be down on the deal. We can conclude that our project IRR needs to be above the investor's hurdle rate to get his money. Summarizing these three criteria, the potential investor will want to break an investment proposal down into expected cash flows. Then, allowing for the passing of time and the interest cost of waiting, the investor will apply a discounted cash flow analysis. In this analysis, he'll apply three criteria: the net present value, the sum of all cash flows valued today, the internal rate of return, or the IRR, that's the effective rate of return that the investment can be expected to generate, and then 3, that IRR needs to be more than the investor's hurdle rate to be attractive to him. A few remarks on the IRR and on what return is enough to attract an investor's money. Here we need to realize that there is a direct relation with the investment risk. The lower the risk, the lower the expected return. If we are lending to a strong government, the risk will be low and investors may be happy with a return of only 1%. The higher the risk, the higher the expected return. If we are investing in a startup firm that has yet to prove itself, the investment risk is probably much higher. An investor may require a return of 15% then to part with his money. To compensate for taking this higher risk, the investor needs a higher return. When we begin to talk about project risk management, we'll see that there's a lot we can do to reduce the project risks, and that, if we do so, we can reduce the project funding cost on the basis of the same principle. With the knowledge of these criteria, we can appreciate that one of the first things we should do in the early stages of developing a project is to analyze the expected cash flows. In practice, that is often referred to as building the business case. If the potential returns are hopelessly low, we cannot hope to attract project funding from private sector investors, and all the costs and work spent on developing such a project may be in vain. Often an investment proposal has significant social and environmental and other benefits on top of, say, its cash flows, or maybe instead of its cash flows. These additional benefits usually flow to everybody, not only to the investor. Everybody enjoys cleaner air, fewer traffic jams, less CO2 emissions and better coastal defences. The financial analysis system that has been described here provides that these are generally only of secondary importance for a private sector investor. They tend to look primarily at the return they can expect for themselves, not so much at the benefits that flow to everybody. They may think, why would I invest in a road if everybody else can use it for free? That's one reason that we need governments to organise such collective matters for us. Thank you all for listening and see you soon.